Monster howled. It was a pandemonium of pain, as though all the men he had eaten cried out too. He dragged himself along the ivory floor, blood pumping from his wound with each fierce beat of his angry heart. He knew he must die from loss of blood. Beowulf let Grendel go. He listened to the hideous howling dying away across the fen. The light grew stronger. The sun lit all the windows of Hall Heorot. Beowulf's men crowded around him. It was some little time before they realized the full extent of the hero's victory. Beowulf was bruised and bloody, and his cheeks were thick with slime off the monster's body. But when he hung Grendel's torn-out arm from a hook in the rafters, all the Geats burst out cheering. It was foul and green and scaly, with a tangle of blood-soaked hair at the wrist, and sharp claws where the fingers should have been. Nobody liked to touch it, but everyone looked. Beowulf acknowledged the congratulations wearily. He called for water. It was brought. He washed the blood and dirt from his body and combed his hair. Then he went to Unferth. Unferth, alone, ignored, sulked under the great throne. His teeth were chattering. His eyes went to and fro. He kept trying to drink from an empty horn. But when Beowulf laid a friendly hand on his shoulder to comfort him, he turned and snapped at it like a wolf. "Murderer," he snarled. "You killed him. He was beautiful, and you killed him." He began to sob and rock, cradling his knees in his hands. The astonished Geats roared disapproval. "Beautiful? He says the beast was beautiful?" Some of them wanted to take ungrateful Unferth out and hang him from the nearest tree. But Beowulf told them to leave the wretch to himself. To Unferth, Grendel was beautiful, was all he would say when his men asked him why. "Here comes Hrothgar," called one by the ruined door. The king could not believe what Beowulf had done. He stood in Heorot and stared at the terrible trophy, Grendel's arm, which still dripped steaming blood on the ivory floor. As for Wealhtheow, she came to Beowulf with open arms and tears in her sky-blue eyes. He knelt before her, and she kissed him tenderly on the forehead. The sun seemed to dance over the land of the Danes. An exultation of larks rose from the fen itself. They went up, 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 trilling dew from their wings, and busily rested and sang and sang. King Hrothgar clapped his hands. "Clean the hall," he shouted to his servants. "Scrub the tables, polish the benches, hang the walls with the richest tapestries. Bring meat and mead, enough for a man as strong as 100 men. All this for Beowulf. Honor to Beowulf. Long live Beowulf, who has freed us from the monster Grendel." They raced their horses. They made poems and songs. They told stories of all the heroes they ever lived, and said their deeds were small compared to what brave Beowulf had done in a single night. Hrothgar gave Beowulf gifts. The gifts were these: a banner of gold, a helmet that would not break, a sword as sharp as a flame. He also made him a present of 8 of his swiftest horses, each horse decked with a golden bridle and a saddle encrusted with precious stones. And Wealhtheow gave Beowulf a ring of the purest gold to wear on his finger, and a golden collar to carry about his neck. This collar, some say, was called Brisingamen. It was the most perfect thing in the world. The feasting went on for 3 days and 3 nights. Only Unferth held apart from it, sitting in a dark corner, twisting his cloak in his hands, muttering of Grendel's beauty and prophesying doom. Nobody paid attention to him. Once, Beowulf offered him a drink, but Unferth spat at it. "I want blood," he said. Of the stories told by Hrothgar's poets, all in honor of Beowulf's feat and meant to provide comparisons with what he had done, the one that made the deepest mark on Beowulf's mind was the story of Sigmund and the fire dragon, and this is how it went. Long ago, there was a prince called Sigmund, who was a great hero. He was strong as a bear and tall as a mountain tree. He could snap chains round his chest simply by taking a big breath, and bent iron bars that took 2 men to lift. Because he used his giant strength only in the service of good, he was always a very popular man. Everyone loved him. None loved Sigmund more than his loyal nephew Fitela. Fitela was as unlike his uncle as it is possible for 2 men to be. He was small in stature, timorous and shy by nature. Men said that Fitela would run away from his own shadow if Sigmund was not with him. However, this never happened because Sigmund always was with him. The 2 of them were inseparable. They fought together, drank together, prayed together. You never saw huge Sigmund, but you saw little Fitela taking 6 strides to keep up with his uncle's 1, peering askance at murky places, tugging at the giant's sleeves, and offering him all sorts of useless advice in a high, squeaky voice. Together, they performed many brave deeds. Nor was puny Fitela as good for nothing in battle as you might think. He could skip through an enemy's legs and trip him up in a trice, while the man was still concentrating on Sigmund as his only opponent. He could hang on horses' tails and make them rear, tumbling their riders to the ground, where it was easy enough for Sigmund to finish them off. He had great value as an impish wreaker of havoc in a line of hostile soldiers, for he had only to hop about in front of them, pulling faces, and then race round the back and shout a few names. Milk chops, skelly bum, barmy sword, hey you with the woolly eyebrows growing out of your ears. To reduce the most well-disciplined squad to an angry confusion that left them with no chance as soon as Sigmund came on the scene. In any kind of adventure, Sigmund and Fitela thus proved themselves an unbeatable pair. The killing of the fire dragon was an exploit that called for the best of their cunning. The dragon was guardian of a treasure hoard so vast and valuable that they knew it would bring prosperity to the land for generations to come. For this reason, they determined to slay it and take the treasure if they could. Now, the fire dragon lived on an island of silver rock. It had 4 heads. The first head, as white as snow, breathed out air. The second head, which was black as pitch, coughed up earth. The third head, sea green, was more terrible than either of these. It spat out great quantities of water. The fourth head was the most horrible head of all. It was flame-colored with bulging blood-red eyes. This head could spit out long forks of searing fire, burning everything to cinders within a range of about a half a mile. Nothing grew on Silver Rock Island because the dragon hated trees and flowers, and as soon as the least green shoot appeared anywhere, he would turn his 4th head and glare at it and whoosh, crack, fry it to bits in one of his tremendous fire spits. Sigmund and Fitela had to work out a plan to get near the dragon in the first place. They did it at night, swimming underwater, approaching Silver Rock Island from different directions. Sigmund swam slowly, stopping every now and again to surface and lie on his back, sending tall spurtles of water up out of the waves. The fire dragon, which slept only 3 heads at a time, so that 1 pair of eyes was always on the lookout, thought it was just a whale playing in the moonlight, and took no notice. Meanwhile, Fitela had reached the rock from the north. Being so small, he was able to crawl up behind the dragon without being seen. Sigmund dived down into the seabed again and swam quickly toward the island. Little Fitela was crouched right by the dragon's tail. As soon as he saw the big telltale bubbles indicating that his uncle was about to emerge from the sea, he grabbed the tail and boldly in both hands and twisted it as hard as he could. The dragon roared with anger. It turned its terrible 4th head to see and destroy whatever the impudent thing was that dared to tweak its tail. It was astonished by Fitela's smallness. Sigmund took good advantage of that moment of astonishment. He heaved himself up on the silver rock and hurled himself at the dragon. The head that breathed out the air lunged at him. Sigmund seized it by the throat and twisted it round. Air came hissing from the head just as fire began to fork from the other one. Fitela would have been burned alive if the flames had reached him, but they did not reach him. Sigmund had locked the two heads together so that the fire was beaten back down the dragon's windpipe by the blast of the air from its other mouth. It writhed and coughed. Fatella pulled again at its tail. Again, the dragon tried to get its fire-throwing head in position to deal with him, but Sigmund grabbed another head, the black one, already coughing up cartloads of earth, and bent the tough neck in his powerful hands, ramming it into the jaws where fire struggled to get the better of air. Dark, heavy soil poured down the dragon's throat. His red eyes popped out of his head as he choked on it. Fatella twisted the dragon's tail once more. Sigmund added the water-squirting head to the complicated knot he had already made out of the dragon's 3 other heads. The forks of flame met by air, earth, and a great flood of water had no chance to get out. The fire traveled down the dragon's belly. He gave a fearful belch and died. In this way, Sigmund and Fatella won the dragon's treasure hoard for the good of the people. When they looked in the cave that had been his den, they found it was crammed to the roof with gold and silver and diamonds and rubies and pearls. They loaded 10 ships with their plunder and sailed happily home. After this cunning adventure, the storyteller concluded, Sigmund and Fatella were famous the whole world over, but their deeds were as flea bites compared to Beowulf's, he added, putting down his harp. Beowulf laughed. He was amused and pleased by this tale and stored it in his memory. Queen Wealhtheow poured the last of the wine into another golden cup for him to drink from. Hrothgar had fallen asleep on his throne, his white-haired head against his polished shield. Soon all the lords and warriors followed suit. They were worn out with happiness. Danes and Geats sprawled side by side on the long, straight benches of the banqueting hall, content that Heorot was a safe place now. Well satisfied with the celebrations they had had in the hero's honor. The poets snored, sore-throated from so much storytelling. The servants dreamt of being masters. Beowulf slept too, his head on his hands, the golden collar glittering round his neck. Only Unferth remained awake. He stared at the arm which hung from the hook. His eyes were dry and bloodshot, full of black thoughts.